Ron Powers, No One Cares About Crazy People, The Chaos and Heartbreak of Mental Health in America. And No One Cares About Crazy People, The Chaos and Heartbreak of Mental Health in America, Ron Powers delves into the complex world of mental health, particularly schizophrenia, as well as the societal debate surrounding the care and treatment of those afflicted with mental illnesses. Through a comprehensive exploration of the science behind the onset of schizophrenia, the cultural impact of figures like Thomas Szasz, and the consequences of deinstitutionalization, the summary provides readers with an eye-opening look at the state of mental health care in America. The book also emphasizes the importance of early diagnosis, alternative treatments, and the responsibility of society to advocate for those who may not have a voice of their own.
Schizophrenia, the role of genes, pruning, and triggers. Schizophrenia is a devastating mental illness caused by the interaction of genetic and environmental factors. Certain genes contribute to the onset of the disorder, but symptoms usually emerge during adolescence when the brain is pruning cells. This process destroys particular cortical synapses, which facilitates communication between neighboring cells. Still, when the old synapses are pruned, the genes involved in schizophrenia come to life, filling in the gaps that trigger a psychotic breakdown later on. The disorder's onset is always the result of external triggers, such as stress and marijuana use, that can precipitate the prodromal phase of schizophrenia. A recent article cites research confirming the link between cannabis use and psychosis, including schizophrenia. The Myth of Mental Illness. The Myth of Mental Illness is a pivotal book by Thomas Szasz that challenges the existence of mental illness. Szasz sees the treatment of mental illness as authoritarian and inhumane, so he aimed to prevent others from interfering with the lives of those suffering from mental illness. He argues that mental illness is merely a set of societal norms that are pathologized and that the mind, unlike the brain, is intangible. Therefore, mental illness is not something that can be deemed wrong. This perspective contributed to a decline in medical professionals choosing mental health as a specialty. In 1975, the Supreme Court made it a violation of civil liberties to hospitalize or medicate a person with mental illness without their consent. Although this protects civil liberties, it can take months to receive such an order, and untreated psychosis can worsen a person's condition. Szasz's opinions have been polarizing, but his work in casting doubt on the legitimacy of psychiatry has been influential in how mental illness is viewed. Mental institutions disaster. In the 1960s, psychiatric institutions closed, freeing Americans with mental illness in a mass deinstitutionalization move. These patients were expected to be cured by drugs such as Thorazine, a schizophrenia treatment. However, such drugs only stabilized patients, and they could not make the illness vanish. Despite the lack of a cure, pharmaceutical companies have capitalized on the general public's desperation and lack of knowledge regarding mental illness, paying countless settlements for advertising false promises of cures. Kennedy's 1963 Community Mental Health Act promised state-level community care and support after releasing patients from institutions. The program's implementation began well, but it was stopped by the Vietnam War, and funding was slashed. Less than half of the proposed centers existed by 1973 when the institutions closed, resulting in 280,000 patients discharged with no place to go. Americans with mental illness were left to fend for themselves, with no one to care for them and no tools to care for themselves. The Consequences of Deinstitutionalization. Deinstitutionalization, the process of closing down mental institutions in the U.S., has resulted in homelessness and marginalization for people with mental illness. Without the support of institutions, they were left to fend for themselves, and many of them resorted to sleeping on the streets and committing crimes to get by. The lack of access to medical treatment also leads to incarceration and inhumane punishment such as solitary confinement. People with mental illness are also at high risk of experiencing police brutality. The tragic case of James Boyd, a man with paranoid schizophrenia who was shot dead by police officers for showing erratic behavior, highlights the need for better support and care for people with mental illness. Protecting society from mental illness. Mental illness is a hidden threat that we must address by diagnosing it early, caring for those suffering from it, and advocating for their rights. Early diagnosis can prevent mental illness from reaching a dangerous stage, and caring for patients through psychosocial rehabilitation can help them integrate positively into society. Not only does this improve the lives of those with mental illness, but it also saves tax dollars that would otherwise be spent on incarceration. Above all, we must speak up for those without a voice to ensure they receive the care and support they deserve.
The summary of No One Cares About Crazy People unravels the complicated intricacies of mental health, with a particular focus on schizophrenia and the impact of external triggers such as stress and cannabis use. Powers dissects the controversy over the existence of mental illness, the crippling consequences of deinstitutionalization, and the urgent need for improved care and treatment. He reinforces the value of early diagnosis, innovative treatment methods like psychosocial rehabilitation, and the need for collective action to protect those affected by mental illnesses. Ultimately, the book serves as a rallying call for society to take responsibility in addressing the many challenges faced by individuals and families dealing with the heartbreak and chaos of mental health in America.